Okay, I can't see. I've got
Oh.
my script.
Ready. Go.
You're going to count? Are you going to count?
You're on.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Marjorie Gans, and I am a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. We are delighted that you could join us this evening for the February 2022 reading in our virtual series, Readings from the Room, which began in March 2021. For anyone who's new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, established or emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write. The room is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and provides desks and silence and the quiet companionship of other writers. We've been serving writers of the greater Boston area since 1993. We have added this year a new level of membership because the room is something that you go to physically. We have also added now a virtual membership, which has all the same perks for regular members, but you wouldn't have access to the room. However, one of the things that you would get is a writing group that provides structure, accountability, and community. Members at all levels are welcome to participate, and the group meets every other week on Tuesdays. The next meeting will be March 1st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And for more information, you can send an email to Leslie Ostro at writersroomofboston.org. And I will get that address onto Instagram for those of you who have access to that. In 2022, we launched this new reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic and share wonderful writing, some by writers who call or have called the Writers' Room home, and some from around the country, which is a benefit that's conferred on us by Crowdcast. Tonight we have Kirby Gan, a Kentucky fiction writer who also teaches at the Naslin Mance Graduate School of Writing at the Spalding University MFA program in Louisville, Kentucky, and Fannie Koa, a journalist and memoirist living now in the Boston area. Kirby and Fannie will read from their work, and then we'll open it to a larger discussion with some time for question and answers at the end. As we go along, please feel free to use the comments feature in the box at the bottom of the screen where you can type in your questions. This series is made possible by grants from Mass Cultural Council and Boston Cultural Council, and we also rely on friends. If you enjoy this program, please consider making a contribution using the donate button at the bottom of your screen. Also, we will be recording this reading, and a replay will be available on Crowdcast. When you click the registration button, it will take you to the recording. We start tonight with Kirby Gan. Kirby is the author of the novel Ghosting, which was included in the Best of Year list from Publishers Weekly and Shelf Awareness, and a finalist for the Kentucky Book of the Year. He has published 2 other novels, The Barbarian Parade, or Pursuit of an Un-American Dream, and Our Napoleon in Rags, and co-edited with poet Kristen Herbert the anthology A Fine Excess, Contemporary Literature at Play, which was a finalist for the Forward Magazine Book of the Year Award anthologies. Most recently, his work has appeared in Plowshares, Post Road, The Oxford American, The Southeast Review, and elsewhere, and currently he is organizing his stories to form a new collection tentatively entitled Them's Got Ears, Let Them Hear. Gan is one of the founding editors of the popular Bookmark series for IG Publishing, a project in which established authors create freewheeling personal narratives to explore a famous work of literature that left a powerful, formative impression on them, and contributed the series' initial volume with a hybrid work of memoir criticism on John Knowles, A Separate Piece. Gan has worked in independent publishing as an editor and book designer for nearly 25 years, and he continues to accept freelance projects from publishers and individual authors and he teaches, as I said, at the Naslin Mann Graduate School of Writing at Spalding University. Gan and his wife, Stephanie, a horticulturist, live in Goshen, Kentucky, among a number of dogs. And you can learn more about Kirby's work at his website, www.kirbygan.net. Kirby.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And Marjorie, thank you for inviting me to take part in this reading series. I don't read in public very often, and so this is an exciting time, and I'm honored to be here. I'm going to read from apparently it's going to be a novella. This is a story I've been working on and off for actually a couple of decades now, and it has appeared in 2 different versions as a short story, but I never felt like I've gotten it right, and it's that one piece that seems to just keep nagging in the back of my head as time goes by, and I'll go back to it to see what's there, and it always wanted to be longer. So that's what I'm working on now, and I'm just going to read the opening to it. It has a couple of different working titles. One is All the Time in the World, which has to do with the basic philosophy of our narrator, as that's how he goes about his business. And also Let the Man Explain, as I think will become apparent from this narrator who suffers a bit from the mansplaining problem. So here we go. Horace wasn't his real name. We all called him that because his given name, Horace, sounded odd and old-fashioned, and people in our share of the swamps prefer to hail a man by a single syllable. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the heat. Here the air gets thick as old honey, and you don't feel much like talking. The boy never took issue with anyone over the name, though even after a year, he still went around introducing himself as Horace Cash of Montreux, Kentucky. Always the full deal, too, like it was a title, or he felt he had to make clear that he came from elsewhere, too far up his own head to notice how this fact smacked locals in the face the second we met him. In the end, it doesn't matter what we called him. A problem's still a problem, whether you got the name right or not, whether you know where it came from or not. And Horace brought a host of grievances to all and sundry. To me especially, if I'm speaking true. That it was me who flung open the gates for him here only makes all that went down after gnaw at me the harder. But I'm far from the only one who deserves blame. They call me George, and I don't know why that is either. I was born Theodore. He pulled onto my lot in a red Alfa Romeo ragtop, slipping steam from under the hood. The car from that old Dustin Hoffman movie. You don't see many of them anymore. Not now, and not at the time I'm talking about. So you can bet I noticed. He had the top down, and bedtime jazz from my father's era blaring hard enough to fuzz the speakers. Music you wouldn't expect from a young buck on a long drive under a hot summer sun. But it takes all kinds, people like to say, and I've seen all kinds of everything, and near every day at that. I service travelers as they come. My day is made different by the make and model of vehicle and the degree of fear or fury in the driver. This one belonged to the furious category. Never you mind the copacetic tunes. He rolled up slinging curses, smacking the steering wheel with bare, bony arms I guessed had never lifted anything heavier than a stack of books. He cut the engine, and his mouth just kept on going, banging extra loud in the big silence that swept down after he killed the stereo. Cussing the whole way, from the driver's seat to my soda machine, and not without even a hello, even though he had to make allowances to get over my lollygagging legs. We were well into a June day's swelter. I'd intended to stay put beneath my big umbrella, tipped back placid in my white wicker chair, and not moving for anybody, as is my wont, and as this is my property, and as I am my own boss. A cold can of Big Red shut him up. He guzzled all of it, standing there with one hand still on the coin drop, crushed the can against the machine, then reared back and erupted into a roar of rage combined with a belch that would have been the pride of a bigger man. That's when he noticed me. There, with his arm flung back, ready to throw the can, he caught hold of himself and broke into a smile, the like of which I imagine his mother or some impressionable girl along the way had told him was his charming, devilish grin. So anyway, he said, like we'd been chatting away the day, and a thought had just sprung up in him needing to be shared. He said, I've been driving like 12 hours. Can you believe that? Kept telling myself to keep going. Picture those white lines as powder. You could snort up all the way to the water. I'm not talking coke now. I've got a prescribed medication. I have a diagnosis. You know what I mean? Wired enough to make it to the Keys. The plan's been to pass out face down in beach sand, wake up with a tide in my hair and a deep sunburn, and man, at least 10 hours straight. The whole way with the top down, too. Rain got me in GA somewhere, but I would not be denied. I didn't congratulate him. He had this air like he was ready to receive congratulations from someone, from anyone and everyone. I'd never heard a man refer to his state by its postal initials in conversation before, nor could I figure, once he'd mentioned he'd come straight down from KY, how it took him that many hours to get to the Panhandle in such a fast car. He went on, so I don't know, the engine's been running hot a while? I don't know jack about freaking Romeos. His voice piddled out, and I couldn't tell if he'd stopped for good or was just taking a breather, or even if he'd asked an actual question. It was like his mouth ran on its own without much direction from him. And then, just as it felt time to speak up, he erupted again, this time with a croaky laugh that told of the number that chewed up pills and sucked down cigarettes had done on his throat. He smacked his forehead. Well, damn, he said, I guess you know I'm at your mercy now. I told him not to worry, that everybody is when they get here. I called him my young friend. Half my job's telling strangers not to worry, and it's no line. I am master of the internal combustion engine, and never one has licked me once I put my mind to the task. Putting my mind to the task can pose an obstacle, true, but my process is proven and cannot be hurried. This can try the patience of stranded drivers, but I say you look to fix a problem so it stays fixed. We got my nose down low among all the hot metal and hose, him shadowing me the while. The smoking head gasket drew a low whistle out of me. He made a tight, strangling sound in the back of his throat. We left it at that. I made a show of clearing his hands before dropping the hood. We couldn't fit him in that day, afternoon being almost shot as it was. In the morning, then, I told him. Say mid to late morning. Better say late morning. He didn't like the sound of that. Wow, he said. I was feeling hopeful when I pulled in. You didn't look all that busy. What am I missing? He pulled out his wallet and started fingering cash money, and already I decided my mind would need 2, maybe 3 days at the outside for this here. I did not expect that news to cheer him. He was one of them full-grown child types, you see. You find them everywhere, so-called adults who don't know what to do or what they want past the right now, but are sure whatever it is, they can get it from someone ready to drop everything to attend to them. You have to be firm with these people. I fixed my eyes on the diesel 12 valve straddling the pit in my garage. You do know how to work on a Romeo, right? Are they all that different from American cars? Should I get a tow somewhere? He asked me this. Standing in my own garage, this boy asked me this. These adult children are exactly like the regular ones, nothing halfway about them. They're either total innocents or total assholes. His voice bugged me too, and he had yet to take off his sunglasses and didn't want to hang around long enough to need to, and I got it. Hamilton County stood far from where he aimed to be. I gave the talk I give all disappointed travelers, led to me by the inherent fallibility of automotive engineering. We had everything he needed and in close walking distance. He could cover meals at June's Kitchen or grab one with a drink at Poppy Doc's on down a ways, or, in a pinch, visit one of the fast food joints on the far side of the overpass, though personally my gut could not tolerate greasy tacos or whatever it was those places do to cheese. More importantly, we had the beach side, right there on the far side of my lot, where the rooms came cheap and bedbug free. Why not make the most of it? The beach side, he both said and asked, a curl in his voice at the end. The name is admittedly fanciful and throws off the uninitiated. Any map will show you it's another 2 hours of interstate to the ocean. Now, it's true our patch of U.S. soil isn't much when compared to your Daytona or Key West. The swamps would have reclaimed the place long ago if not for I-75 throwing us a bone in the shape of the cloverleaf. But the entrepreneurial spirit here has long been strong, and some years back, the motel's original owners, Hugh and Sue Whitler, realized landlocked swampland wasn't what drew America's minivans and station wagons to FLA. So Hugh Whitler, a former Navy guy who'd retired inland after a second career as a deep-sea fisherman and a host of side businesses in development and renovation, decided to hell with geography and set up his own beach right there in his own parking lot. He excavated the big saltwater pool himself, trucked in tons of white gypsum, and ran a cyclone fence about what we locals came to call the Gulf of Whitler. I helped rig the filtration system and pumps, not so much out of friendship as to see just how all this was going to work. His wife Sue crafted the "No Gators Allowed" sign and needlepoint that still hangs by the gate there in its glass case. She worried gators might get curious of the pool, as it soon became home to one common bottlenose dolphin. And like that, we had ourselves an honest American roadside attraction. The creature was blind in one eye and scarred heavy around the head, but it was the real thing. And how he came to have her, Hugh Whitler never explained, not even in the papers left behind when he died. That dolphin's what got us stuck with Horace Cash of Montreux, KY. Every other traveler waylaid here had someplace else to be. They passed a night or two in the motel, marveled a moment at our living miracle of wild nature, and moved on. Not Horace. I don't like to speculate what's going on in another man's mind, but once he laid eyes on that dolphin, he started to look at his Romeo's misfortune from a different angle. He was the kind of man, and young enough still, to argue that great untruth that everything happens for a reason. Thank you.
Great. Am I on again? Just checking. Yes, good. Okay. Kirby, thank you. That was really wonderful. And we're still going to move on to our second reader, Fannie Koa. So about Fannie. Before moving to the U.S. to build a new life, Fannie Koa was a freelance journalist in Manila, Philippines. She covered news, features, and travel. Her work was published in magazines, anthologies of Chinese Filipino writing, and the Philippine Star. During the pandemic, she finally got a chance to reboot her creative writing muscles and got a scholarship to attend a memoir workshop at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Other opportunities opened up at Grub Street, and then she was offered a scholarship to attend the Salty Quill Writers Retreat in 2021. Looks like the universe wants her to keep going, so she's working on a memoir and a few other things. You can stay tuned and you can see more about Fannie on her website, fanniekoa.medium.com. Fannie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marjorie, for inviting me, and thank you to everyone who is here for me today. It means a lot to me. I just want to provide a bit of context for this piece. I'm ethnically Chinese, born and raised in the Philippines, and I wrote this to explore my own questions about identity. Then I heard that the former president was exploring the idea of using martial law to overturn the election, and I knew I had to write my way through the very unpleasant feelings of horror and deja vu that most Filipinos of a certain age probably experience too. Anyway, here goes. I'm a martial law baby. There's a whole generation of us, but I was born in 1972, the same year President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines to begin cementing his path to dictatorship. On the pretext of addressing a communist threat, Marcos put the country under the rule of military law. He ordered all powers of government transferred to his office. He had all privately owned media seized and shut down. He banned group assemblies. There was a curfew. On the night my mother went into labor with my brother, my parents were stopped on the way to the hospital. At the sight of my very pregnant mother, they were allowed to go on their way, but being out after curfew was otherwise cause for detention. There were no elections. Sometimes people would tell stories about former President Ramon Magsaysay, a man of the people, or President Diosdado Macapagal, so corrupt that even his arenola, his chamber pot, was made of gold. But during my childhood, there was only ever one president, Marcos. When martial law was implemented, the writ of habeas corpus, a law that protects personal liberties, is suspended, which allowed Marcos to begin arresting and detaining activists, political rivals, and journalists without cause. In nearly 10 years of martial law between 1972 to 1981, an estimated 70,000 people were imprisoned, 34,000 tortured, and 3,240 killed. Prisoners were beaten, waterboarded, strangled, raped, and burned with flat irons and cigarettes. Marcos also bled the country dry while his family and cronies got richer and fatter. My parents recalled a time when the Philippines was among the most progressive and advanced Asian countries. But in the 20 years Marcos was in power, we became the second poorest country next to Bangladesh. I spent my childhood blissfully oblivious to this horrendous period in my country's history. Like many immigrant families, we tried to keep a low profile and did our best to simply go about living our lives. My parents were raised in post-World War II Manila, so maybe martial law was a picnic in comparison. I actually met Marcos in person once in a resort called Puerto Azul. We were there on vacation, and he was there too, probably for some official meetings. I don't remember how old I was, but I was fearless at the time. So my family urged me to go up to the presidential table and ask if I could shake his hand. He seemed smaller and more ordinary than I expected a president to be. I do remember riding the fumes of attention for weeks afterwards from friends and family who kept asking me about the encounter. He may have been the first famous person I ever met, and definitely the most infamous. One thing that Marcos did that significantly changed our lives as Chinese Filipinos was to create a path to citizenship. Communist China was beginning to open their doors economically and politically to the rest of the world. And to prepare for diplomatic relations with China and a state visit in 1975, Marcos issued Letter of Instruction number 270 to encourage and facilitate the acquisition of Philippine citizenship to deserving and qualified Chinese residents. Although my parents were born and raised in the Philippines towards the end of World War II, they carried Republic of China or Taiwanese passports, and their nationality was listed as Chinese on their birth certificates. Unlike the United States, you cannot become a citizen just by being born in the country. Citizenship is derived from your parents, so my birth certificate says my nationality is Chinese too. As resident aliens, we could not vote or own property, but we could go to school, hold down jobs, and run businesses. In the first 2 months of the year, legal residents are required to bring their alien certificate of registration and check in with the Commission on Immigration and Deportation. It's like getting your annual car inspection sticker here in the US and just about as pointless. Before the new law was implemented, the process to apply for citizenship was difficult by design. You had to have enough money, and by enough, we mean a lot, to pay for the exorbitant application fees and the bribes required to keep things moving. You had to read and write English, Filipino, and Spanish, a near impossibility given that most of the candidates were illiterate and could not even read and write in Chinese. The process could take up to 5 years because you needed to file an intention, then wait 1 year to file a formal petition, publish this petition in a newspaper, attend the hearing, receive the order of naturalization, and then wait another 2 years before it officially took effect. With the new process, citizenship was granted by presidential decree after all the less stringent requirements were met, with no probationary period. To put this in perspective, there were only 37 approved naturalization applications in 1974. The following year, with the new law, there were 2,802. In the next 5 years, over 24,000 ethnic Chinese families were naturalized by administrative decree, and we were one of them. My brother Bill and I were naturalized along with my father as his dependents. I can still see the black and white picture of myself as a toddler looking mildly surprised, stuck on a long, official-looking document. The same picture was in my first ever Filipino passport. I also have a vague memory of having my hand taken, pressed onto a black ink pad, and then onto a piece of paper. The 4 long fingers first, the thumb afterwards. Bill, who was just a baby, was too little to get fingerprints, so his paperwork features his footprint. My mother was not planning to get Filipino citizenship. My parents had decided that it made sense for one of them to be of a different nationality, just in case we had to flee the country in the future. Then a law changed and required that everyone who worked in the financial services had to be Filipino citizens. My mother, who worked at a bank, had no choice but to go through naturalization or lose her job. She remembers being summoned for her oath ceremony just 2 weeks after our youngest brother was born, when she was supposed to be home for her getlay. This is a month-long postpartum recovery period where she was just going to stay in bed, eat rich and nutritious foods, and drink herbal tonics while the rest of the women in the household took care of her and the baby. She had to go out in the rain and even wade through some nasty floodwaters so she could be sworn in as a new Filipino. I wonder if she started swearing before she arrived. Later, my parents would say with a tinge of pride that my youngest brother Shannon is the only person in the family who can become president, because by law, only natural-born Filipinos can hold that office. He is the only one of us born after his parents were already, officially, Filipino. Martial law was abolished in 1981, but Marcos was securely entrenched in power by then, and even though elections were held, they were widely known to be fraudulent. Still, my family voted. When each of us turned 18, we joined our parents in the short trek to the local elementary school on election day, and we all cast our ballots together. Even long after martial law, it was easy to feel like our votes didn't matter. But it mattered that we could. It felt like a privilege to be able to vote, and frankly, it still does. I've had to earn the right to vote not once, but twice in my life. The second time when I became a US citizen in 2010. It should come as absolutely no surprise that it drives me totally crazy when people take their citizenship for granted and sit out elections.
That it's fascinating. I heard you in rehearsal, and it's still fascinating. So,
Thank you.
And I believe Kirby's going to be able to rejoin us. There he is. So I don't see any questions in the question box, but I have some. And actually, our tech person has given me a question to ask Fannie. So I'll start there. She wrote to me during this and said, Fannie's presenting such interesting facts in a very warm way. I wonder what it's like to go back and write about all of her history.
So when I was researching this piece, I had to go back and look up a lot of things because I was a kid. So my experience of this was, it was my childhood. It was just the way things were. But one of the reasons I wanted to write this piece is this week is actually the anniversary of the day that Marcos was deposed from power. So 36 years ago, on February 25, there was a huge event in the Philippines called the People Power Revolution. And it was a peaceful, bloodless revolution that was able to get Marcos out of power. And so while I was writing this and I was pulling in, what my family was going through, it's really frustrating to think about what happened and how powerful it was and how much it took for the Filipino people to get out of this dictatorship. And then to think about today, the contrast between 36 years ago and today. Unfortunately, there's another presidential election in the Philippines right now. And the frontrunner candidate is none other than Ferdinand Marcos Jr. So, there's a lot of frustration that was brought up by writing this piece, apart from bringing up, all of the things that happened growing up in the Philippines. There's this continued sense of we don't learn as a human species. Like, why are we here again? As I'm reading about the things that happened 30 years ago, it's like, okay, well, it's happening again in another form now. And unfortunately, I feel like this was supposed to be a memoir. This was supposed to be me exploring my identity as it evolved when I was growing up in the Philippines. But all of this is still current. It's still relatable. And I would love for people to become more aware that this is what happens in martial law, because this was on the table for the previous administration to extend their term. And no one's really, if you don't pay attention, history is going to repeat itself.
Thank you. I think that's some of what maybe a number of us were thinking. I can't speak for anybody else, but I'm aware that we're running over a little bit, and I'm going to go with that. Obviously, if people need to leave, they can leave, but I'm so happy there are so many of you here, and I do have a question for Kirby. So I'm going to go ahead and let's get all hang out for a few more minutes. So Kirby, just listening to you, and I also read your novel, I am so struck by the way you create voices, different voices. And even if you're a Kentucky native, which I don't know what you are, but I'm just wondering how you, and this is selfish because I struggle with this, how you sort of find the different voices of the people you write about.
That's a tough question, Marjorie. I don't know. I think it's sort of like you hear about how some musicians can't read music, but they can play very well, and they're what you call ear players. I think it's a little bit just like that. It's not something that I totally consciously try to do, but I just start to hear a voice, and it might remind me of someone, and I'll think, well, what was it like when so and so would we'd be hanging out and he'd tell me a story, or what sort of voices have I heard on the street? And isn't there? I am a native Kentuckian, but I moved away and lived all over for several years, and then moved back. And I think anytime you're thrown into if you know one place very well and then you're thrown into a foreign place, you're very struck by the different ways that people speak. And I don't know, it just kind of sticks in my head a bit. they don't just come out full-fledged or anything like that. But as I'm writing, I'm one of those writers who most of the real work gets done in revision. And so as I'm writing something out, then I'm not worried about the voice so much. But when I go back through and start reading what's actually there on the page, it seems to be around then is when I start to really think in terms of voice and can often really hear the way this person would speak. I'd mentioned that this story is one that wouldn't leave me alone. And I've gone back to it, even though there are two earlier versions that have been out in the world. None of them were, or the earlier two weren't narrated by a character. But this narrator, George Gall, the character, he's just nagged at me for years and years of just sort of like, you didn't pay enough attention to me. And when I started again with this version, trying it in his voice, it's like I can literally hear him speaking. And it's funny too, because I don't think this has ever happened to me before, but he's just there all the time. Like I can miss a significant amount of time without working on the piece. And when I finally have the opportunity to go back, it doesn't require any huge effort to sort of find him again. I just start reading what I've gotten so far, and then there he is again. He starts telling me more.
That's great. Thank you. And I really love the analogy with music. I think that's actually going to help me think about it. Just different kinds. You can go from the Rolling Stones to Bach, and they all have a voice.
Right on.
So thank you both, Fannie and Kirby, for those just wonderful readings. So different. I feel like we've covered just worlds tonight, and we have a wonderful audience. I'm just delighted that so many people came. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Writers Room Program Director, Leslie Ostro, who is tonight's producer and tech maven. Please stay tuned. Our next reading is on March 16th, and we will have Leah Henderson, who writes young adult fiction, and Julie Skolnick, who is a musician who has written a memoir that incorporates some of her musical life. So thank you all again, and good night. And thanks for sticking around for those extra few minutes. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
Fannie.
you.
Good reading.
Thank you.